Hey everyone, good afternoon, almost, if you have lunch, or at least you should, probably. This will take a little bit. I'm here today to talk about something that have been around for a while, but recently is probably getting a huge movement around and big players around this subject. And so the idea with this talk is to present a little bit what is the current state, talk about the history, and later on also show you some devices if you want to start to play a little bit with this. So I'm Pedro. I am co-founder and technology evangelist for Singular. On a daily basis, I work with a lot of other fancy stuff like automation stuff, Kubernetes, and so on. But this time, I tried to give it a chance to something that I've been using for as a hobby for a really long time already. Okay, it's good to see you all here. So I hope that you enjoyed the talk, and if you have any questions, don't have any troubles in questioning during the demo or the presentation as well. Okay. So I will start talking a little bit what was my motivation around this. Probably some people that are on this touching this subject, they have similar ones as well. I will do a short intro about what home automation is, what you can do with it, talk a little bit about the history, and concepts and landscapes around the subject, and a little bit, not that much, about security, but so that you guys at least are aware of what are the problems, and talking about the barriers and some of the things that probably prevented home automation to be a subject that took so long to actually go on. Okay. So, motivation. As everyone knows, probably Jetsons. This wasn't mine, but everyone thinks about home automation and start looking into Jetsons, Rosie, and the cleaning vacuum around people. And today we have Roomba that does exactly the same in a smaller scale, of course, but this wasn't mine, okay? My motivation started around 12, 14 years ago, I guess, in a university project that I did around the subject where we did something quite similar to what we have today, but back then there was no standards, there was anything that you could actually continue with it. So when I get back into the time and look what we were able to achieve and see this point in time, I probably lost a good opportunity for business. So it's still, the second part was 10 years after I'm currently building my house, and I started to think that probably was the time to actually start thinking about something like this for fun. The other part is also this is for people who have these kind of interests, and if you have sons who also like it, or fathers, that's my case. This was also a good point in time to bond a little bit with my parent that actually likes to all this electronic stuff and so on. And every time a new device arrives at our home, it seems like we are kids waiting for a toy. Okay? So this is what you can expect when you get into this side of the world and starting to automate everything. And probably you will try to automate more than you actually need. Okay? So this was my main motivation at current pace. So what is home automation? Home automation is something that allows you to control, monitor, and automate things on your daily basis. For example, lights, doors, climate, so the temperature in your room, appliances, nowadays they are starting to appear, entertainment systems, and looking to your efficiency about energy, and also the security of your house with CCTV cameras and stuff like that. And a little bit more fancy, but as well, gardens, for example, taking care of your water to the garden, stuff like that, okay? Common use cases that people probably, I think it's the ones that most people will always end up in having. It's routines that allow you to do certain things that you normally do when you wake up, when you go to bed at night, or when you arrive at home. For example, putting music for some people, some others is putting the TV on, stuff like this. Turning your garden lights at sunset, for example, ensuring that your shutters are actually closed when the sun is gone. And in Portugal, or at least where I live, it's a bit cold. it's a good thing to do, enjoy the sun and warm up the house, but after that, you aren't there to actually close it, and the cold weather will start to enter in, okay? So the other one, I think this one is probably one of the subjects that my wife will like best. It's actually, there is no need to actually wake up and pick the phone and try to put the light on just to go to the bathroom or something like that. If you can actually automate something like when you wake up and you put the lights really, really smooth so that you can actually walk into your house without waking up with all the lights. This is the kind of things that you can do with automation of home automation. Of course, this isn't fancy. This is something that people are doing for smart buildings for quite some time, or if they aren't, they should. But the difference is that this is now being applied to small houses, flats, and stuff like that. So, going to the next part, a few other security or common use cases about security, for example. I travel a lot, and one of the things that people turn to do, it's actually to put some scenes to, for example, simulate that you are at home. And you can create random scenes that no one actually sees it unless they are there probably 24 or 48 hours to see if you are entering or not. But you can actually do that. Besides that, things like putting fake barking of dogs inside of your house, because security alarms, there is tons of other ways to turn around, but usually with dogs, there are some, but not everyone can go there as well. And for example, I have a dog at my house, but probably it's not the kind of dog that will actually do any security in there. So some other stuff, like as I mentioned before, humidity, heating, child monitoring is also an interesting use case that I've seen as well. People that were able to identify when their kids wake up during the evening and were just walking around in the house. And in general, they don't notice. But you can use something like a presence detection sensor to actually detect that and alarm you with the lights or something like that. If you are on the outside taking beers with your friends, you can also notice that. This is the kind of things for me. I like to automate everything, and particularly the ones that make my life easier. Okay? So this is the kind of things I'm interested in. Even more, that, as you can see, and I will show a lot of devices, I buy a lot of small packages and that are delivered at my place. And probably everyone has the same problem. You never know when the mailman was actually there. With a simple presence detection or some other types, you can actually understand and get a notification if you got a mail in your actual physical mailbox. Okay? History. As I mentioned, this is not new. The first time that we start seeing things related with home automation was 30 years ago. So the first automation machine was built, and back then, I think it was just built. Probably some random prototype that was never actually applied. Later on 75, we have probably what was one of the biggest competitors, or one of the biggest changes that we've seen in the home market of appliances. That was the launch of a protocol named X10. This protocol was using the power line to actually send communication across devices. Okay? And back then, you started to see some places and supermarkets and stuff like that selling these small appliances. The problem was mostly the price. And if you are an engineer, you also know that power line sometimes is a bit tricky for digital signals as well, and limited as well. Okay? Later on, a consortium or association in the United States of builders actually coined the term about smart house. They were already thinking in '84, so I was 1 year old, to start thinking about the idea of putting a bit more knowledge or sensitivity in the houses. Still, after that, we didn't see much. Later on, we started to see the first test, a camera that was actually transmitting images through the internet, and that was 1994. Okay. Later on, MIT did some research, and they started to identify that the future would be around something that today everyone heard about, that is IoT, or Internet of Things. And this, they said, so we are talking about 1999, almost 20 years ago, or sorry, 10 years ago, that this would eventually become a thing, okay? Later on, there was a big lack of standards. So we had in the X10 being used in the US. In Europe, there was 2 other protocols that were being used mostly for proprietary systems. That was Batibus and AEB. And later on, they created a consortium that eventually imported and created a standard that is called KNX. This is probably the most used standard for everything from smart buildings, smart homes, and so on. And it's probably, if you are doing something from scratch, it's probably one good point to start. One of the things is, KNX is not that complex, but the knowledge is in a few companies. And involves cabling to put on everywhere, so that means that if you are building a new house, you can do it. If you aren't, then you probably can't, or you will have a lot of troubles. I will talk a little bit further about this. Sorry. In 2000, we have seen the first refrigerator created by LG that was what they called as a smart appliance. Okay, so we are talking once again 19 years ago. And we started to listen a little bit about IoT, and IoT, it was a fuzzy thing that no one actually knew what it would have eventually end up in being. So after that, we can see in 2014 that some studies show that around 100 million smart homes were already using some kind of technology to improve the way the actual house would go. And this where things started to get a bit more odd and funnier, I guess. So in the same year, Google bought Nest. Nest was and is still one of the biggest manufacturers about small devices for smart home, and really good ones as well, but expensive also. And later on, Samsung acquired a smart company, a startup, that was SmartThings. And today, you can basically buy their device probably in every single electronic shop at an affordable price. So we started to see a huge movement around big brands, the ones who have money to invest on this, to actually see that there are some potentials here, okay? So let's see what happens after that. So we can see the last 3 years, Apple and Google released HomeKit and Google Home. Basically, their interface to control home appliances. And of course, let's face it, if you are a small company and you are building devices, and Google has something that allows you to control those devices, as a company, you need to be there if you want to go into the future and you want to sell your devices. So of course, after these changes, a lot of manufacturers start to create what we call skills for the devices and stuff like that. And once you get traction, I think it happened in the past with, in the past everyone probably remember that everyone says that Linux systems and Mac OS systems that didn't have virus. Yeah, that was true until the point in time that actually it worked to actually build virus for them. And the same is happening with IoT as well. In 2016, the first malware was actually created that basically allowed to take control of a lot of small devices and doing an attack. I'm going to talk a little bit in the security context about this as well. Later on, we also see the big players like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon creating specific services on their catalogs to support this IoT movement. And now we have a lot of things around this that you can do with their products as well. Later on, we have seen Amazon acquiring Ring. Ring is also a video doorbell company that got a lot of traction in the US. And once again, the big companies, if they can't build, what they will do is acquire the small ones. So we can see that basically with that, big players are trying to get into the market. We have IKEA that also started a small amount of devices that they sell on their houses. And recently, they basically partnered up with Xiaomi, that is a huge technology company in China, that have really amazing and cheap devices to actually start building more stuff around them. So the expectation was that by the end of 2018 that 200 million households were actually controlled by some kind of technology. Okay? The question now, what did it change? Why in the last 3-4 years this had so much changes, there was so much new things appearing on? It's simple, money talks. And the rest comes out from it. So we can see that basically the IoT market is expected to reach in 2020 $8.9 trillion in market. So that means a lot of money. And of course, all these big players, Samsung, Amazon, Google, and probably a few others like Philips as well, IKEA, Xiaomi, all of them, they want to get a piece of it. I would like to have just 1% of it, I wouldn't mind, and probably they are trying to reach a bit more. But that's what made the evolution, okay? Of course, around that, there was other companies, smaller ones, that also did a lot of innovation. And I'm going to show you a few examples about some devices that can also be used and that are related to this. So we can see that the expectations, and looking back to the future, there is a huge expectation in the amount of devices. 36 billion devices is expected in a couple of years. $3.1 billion, it's expected to be expanded on IoT security. Let's face it, security is the only thing that usually only appears after things get problematic, not before. That means if this is happening, that means there is a real threat, security threat, but also that means that there is a lot of money involved. And more than that, related with specifically IoT and smart home markets, the expectation is that in 3 years to have 122 billion. So this is basically what, in my opinion, made the market to change a lot in the last few years. Of course, there was some technology involvement, but I think, in general, the technology wasn't the problem, but indeed, the fact that for this, everything needs to be aligned, standards, and money needs to be present, okay? So going a little bit to the concepts of home automations. In home automations, we have basically three types of entities, let's call it that way. It's what we call sensors, basically to measure temperature, humidity, CO2, smoke, and so on. And we have actuators, so switches that you can turn on lights, you can actually turn on, for example, the air conditioning, the heating, and stuff like that. And the third one is the hubs or controllers that most of the time will allow you to connect all this stuff to your own system or to connect to the actual system with graphic interfaces and so on. Looking back to the landscape, I think this is a bit tricky because when I started to analyze this, I think about 1 year ago, to start looking back to this, it's huge. The amount of possibilities that we have, it's really hard to understand what are the differences, it's hard to understand which ones do you need, if you actually need some. So what I'm going to talk a little bit, it's about some possibilities and maybe some cases where you want to apply some or others, okay? So starting by the cable versions, if you are doing a reconstruction or building a new house, you can opt for this. It's probably the most reliable, not probably, it's the most reliable way to do smart home automation is through KNX, okay? Later on we have X10, as I mentioned before, and we also have MQTT that can use cabling Ethernet, for example, to actually send information from the devices to a control system. And MQTT is basically I would say probably one of the most used frameworks or protocols that to connect everything within smart homes, from new buildings to existing ones, because it's basically what is also being used for the industry, for smart cities and stuff like that, okay? When you go back, you also have to select between cable and wireless. If you are on an existing house, probably putting new cables is something that you don't want or you probably can't do, okay? So I think here is where a lot of changes happened and improved things. In the past, we had Z-Wave. Z-Wave was a nice protocol with quite security reliable, but the problem was that everything around this protocol made the devices so expensive that basically end up in the fact that people couldn't buy them. So for example, to control a roller shutter, there is a fiber device that is really good, but costs 50 euros. So you need to think, if you have, let's say, 5 roller shutters, you have to spend 250 euros just for that. That's a lot of money, right? So after that, we have seen the appearance of ZigBee devices. ZigBee, it's a protocol that allows devices to create a mesh network where each device will join the network, and some devices are capable to even extend the network. And this is really nice when we are talking about wireless, because its coverage is always a big problem, okay? So ZigBee allows you, if you have a device, a sensor device that is usually powered by battery, of course that device can't be a repeater. But, for example, if you have a smart plug, you probably want to use it to actually extend your network. It's a bit tricky. Sometimes not all devices work as we expect to. Not all of them will act as routers. But I think we are getting into that path. And Xiaomi is one of the manufacturers that use ZigBee as the bare bones or the back of their entire system. Okay? Besides that, we also, as I mentioned, we also have KNX. KNX also have standards defined for using radio frequency as well. So you can put your entire house connected to using the same protocol standard with different transport means. The second part is where we're looking to back is Bluetooth. Bluetooth is nice, but until one year, I think ago, there was a bit problematic. That is, having devices with battery powered and Bluetooth, usually the battery wouldn't last that long. Currently, there is a new protocol or standard that is basically Bluetooth low energy, and this is going to compete directly with ZigBee in a different scale, but it's going to be an interesting one to see how it goes as well. The other part, as we know, we also have Wi-Fi. And I think here, with things as Arduino, a lot of do-it-yourself kits, people started to use a lot of these things. For devices that are not battery related, using Wi-Fi, it's fine. For the ones that are, probably is not a good option because you don't want to be going around your entire house every single month and changing the batteries from all your sensors as well. But I think the Wi-Fi itself allowed the users of existing components to be assembled in manners that probably no one was expecting as well. Okay. Going back to the next part, so we have the protocols is basically what allows parts to connect to each other. And we also have some platforms. So the platforms that have been around, so for example, you can see OpenApp and Domotics. I think they are being built. By the way, these are only open source platforms. I'm not talking about any proprietary ones. There are a lot of them. But OpenApp and Domotics have been here for a while. And I think from what I heard, they are quite good systems. I never used them, to be honest. I went directly to the new kid in the neighbor that is called Home Assistant. Home Assistant is an open source project that was started, I think, I'm not entirely sure if it was 2 years ago, something around that. But the traction of Home Assistant was so big that they are basically doing release cycles every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks you can expect something new or sometimes something to break on your house as well. So probably you should be a bit more conservative in doing that. Otherwise you might have some family members telling you that things won't work and I don't want this at home anymore. And that's probably not something that you want to go through. Okay? I'm going to show you a little bit about Home Assistant as well. You can see here, so for example, Home Assistant, recently they released an entire new front end that is based on new concepts and so on. But this is the kind of things you can see in Home Assistant. You can have sensors with graphs, you can have the switches, you can have things like identifying if people are home or not. Based on that, then later on trigger integrations and stuff like that. Talking a little bit about security. I'm far from being a security expert, so that's the first part. But I think there are a few things when you are entering in this subject. And to me, when I started this as a hobby again, it ended up in actually improving my knowledge about a lot of other things. Because home automation implies that you need to have a good knowledge about networking, which I don't have that much. And I honestly hoping to get better on that. And also about security. Because 80% of the Americans are worried about smart home devices security issues. And when I look into this, yeah, they should. If you look back to the history, I'm going to talk a little bit about some security issues or stories that we have listened in the last couple of years. And I think with this, the idea is not to make you afraid of that, but on the other hand, it's to make you aware of this. Because every time that you are connecting your smart home to the internet, you need to be aware of this. Okay? So a while ago, some researchers created a skill on Amazon Echo. So Amazon Echo is the device that allows you to give instructions by voice. And based on that, you can do later a lot of other things, connect your devices and trigger lights and stuff like that. So some researchers were able to create a skill that was accepted in the Amazon store, and later on this skill, what it did was basically after you send the command to actually do stuff, they will continue to record stuff and send this to remote web servers. So think about, probably you might not be talking about nothing that important that others will want to have, but still it's about privacy, okay? Another thing that happened with Amazon as well was a viral eavesdropping story that Amazon Echo misunderstood the commands and started to record a really long conversation. Okay, nothing new, same as before, right? The problem here is that in the end, the Echo just sent that recorded message to one of your contacts. So that means now, if you are talking something that you shouldn't, it might end up in the wrong person. That's probably something that goes a little bit more into something that you don't want to happen, right? Also, we have seen some cases that a lot of security cameras being exposed to the internet. So it's easy. We go there, we buy a security camera. You go into Google, you say, I need to access the security camera from the internet. Great, go to your router and does this. No one actually explains you what are the consequences. What should you do before you do that, okay? So this happened, and this led to the next topic. That was Mirai botnet. So a smart guy that is used to this kind of security stuff, it just started thinking about the IoT stuff, devices, and he went to look into some devices. And he noticed that a lot of cameras had no credentials on their cameras. So that means that in general, the password was blank and the user was admin. That means for people that are not used to security or to software, they probably didn't change it as it happened. So what this guy tried to do was to basically start to go into a range of IP addresses, trying to get to try to log into those cameras. In the end, he was able to create a botnet that could be used for doing distributed denial of access. So as we see, it's nothing fancy. It's really easy to secure. The problem is that before, a lot of these manufacturers were not aware, and things were into a point in time that they didn't need to be caring so much about this. That's not currently the case, okay? So this was what I mentioned before as the first malware that was given into the network of IoT, and that had some impact. And the guy wrote about this, he even put the code base online for everyone to see it, and he probably did a lot of talks about it as well. Another one, we have Philips. We talk and we think, we have seen, okay, in general, okay, this is a big brand, they should be aware of security. Okay, we have seen Amazon. It's a software can have bugs, there are things that we don't record, right? In the case of Philips Hue, was a bit more tricky, okay? There were two things that happened. We are talking about Philips Hue. For the ones who don't know, it's a lamp. And you think, okay, what might you be able to do with a lamp? Not that much, right? Not that really. So some people were basically able to get near the devices and basically upload new firmware to the devices. Once you do that, it means that you are inside of the network that the device is being hosted. And with that, you can do a lot of other things. So for example, a while ago, a guy from Avast or Kaspersky, I'm not entirely sure, did a presentation where he talked about security in smart homes. And by the fact that he exploited one single device, he was able to use Sonos speakers to actually order a Tesla on Alexa. Okay? So this is the kind of things that you can do once you get into the inside of the network. So we need to think about security not as with that single device, but the fact that the attack surface might be way bigger once you get control of that single device. Also another one, it's August. August is a smart lock company. They do some other devices, but one of the products that they have, it's smart locks. A while ago, someone just discovered that you can, smart locks is basically something really useful, that you, if you have someone at your door that you need to let them in, you can just create a PIN code or remotely and allow access so that they can go inside your house, do something and get out, something like that. But some guys just discovered that once they had the guest access, they could actually get more privileges and create administrator accounts. So we think about this, okay, this is a big thing. I'm not going to put a smart lock on my house, right? I'm not sure that much, because if you look back to the talk that was today or yesterday here about lockpicking, if a burglar wants to go inside your house, there are 10,000 other ways to do it, and probably they will not go with the security of software at all. They will do some other random stuff, like breaking a window and stuff like that. So it's easier. So it's just one point in time, or one more thing to take into account. Ring is also, as I mentioned, was acquired by Amazon. A while ago, they have some video doorbells. They have some video doorbells, and basically, this video doorbell had a security flaw that once the passwords were reset, and for example, you have the device, you sell the device to someone else because you don't use it anymore, and the person thinks, okay, I reset the passwords, everything should be fine. Wrong. People was able to access the devices even after the passwords were being changed. So this is a bit critical. Another one, it's also from big players. So we have, as I mentioned, we have Apple HomeKit that allows you to control devices through iOS. And one of the updates actually allowed smart locks to be controlled by HomeKit due to a software bug that reset the state of the smart locks in the HomeKit itself. Okay? So my point here is not about being afraid about this, it's about knowing about this, okay? Knowing that this can happen and try to have the measures or some of them. Or at least know the risk when you are doing certain stuff, okay? So a few considerations that you should take care or in consideration when you are building something like this or starting is reduce the attack surface as much as possible. This is valid for any software system, right? If your API doesn't need to be exposed to the outside, then don't expose it. Why are you doing that, right? So the same thing is about this. Investing on a good router. So I think here it's probably one of the things that money might be a good option, because you need to have a router that gives you good support about firmware updates and stuff like that. Ideally, to have some kind of firmware or to firewall to apply in there as well. The other part is that it's also, if you are doing and maintaining all of this, you should also be careful with applying this. As I mentioned before, your network or your system is as secure as the weakest link that you have in there. And if the weakest link is exposed to the internet, then probably it's a big problem. And the main idea is if you start thinking about all the smart appliances you can have, control switches and stuff like that, you probably will end up in hundreds of devices in your home. And it's impossible to ensure that all of them are secure. So one of the good ways to do that is to try to ensure that they are as much as isolated as they can. And of course, not exposing them to the internet unless you necessarily need it. For example, a good use case that I personally hate, and this is the reason why I don't use my Google Home devices connected to my Home Assistant yet, is exactly because I need to expose the Home Assistant APIs to the internet so that Google can actually call me. There are a few other ways to do it around, but I'm not going into that much detail. So sometimes if you want to, you might need to do it, but you need to consider and know the risks about it. So as I talked before, securing networks, isolating devices, and once again, if you have a camera, why the hell does your camera need to send images to the internet if you access your camera to Home Assistant or some other software? If you don't, then disconnect it. That way you are sure that your device is not sending something to a random server in China or something like that. Okay? So be aware of these kind of implications. Smart home barriers. So we have seen a little bit about the history, a little bit what is the current evolution of things. In my own opinion, I think standards are getting there, still not entirely there, but as much as these big companies come into a place, there will always be convergence into some ecosystems. So you will have devices that are actually more friendly to use with Amazon ecosystem, some others with Google Home, and so on. In my case, I chose the Google Home path, and the reason is because Google already knows too much about my life already. So I would prefer to send to them, than to actually send to another supplier like Apple or Amazon again. Okay? So that was my choice. You can have your own. The second part is about the cost. As I mentioned, and I'm going to show a few devices, we have seen a huge drop in pricing on the devices that you can use. And this is starting to get affordable to regular people that don't live in Malibu, that have regular homes as well. Okay? So I think in this we already seen some changes. There are still some devices that are expensive, but probably most of them are actually the ones that you actually should throw money in. Security stuff, CCTV cameras, and stuff like that. Okay? The other part is knowledge. I think during this talk I touched so many different subjects, from devices, so we are talking about electronics, we are talking about software, we are talking about networking, security, and standards, okay? There are the scope of knowledge to actually be able to do this is so big that it's really complicated to acquire all this information. And currently, if you look into the market in Portugal, you're probably going to see that if you ask for a price tag to do this in your home, it's probably one that you're going to think in going on vacations probably to Malibu or something else, besides putting the smart homes there. And this is because the knowledge is concentrated in a few companies and so on. But I think this is actually changing. And this is getting affordable. Things like IKEA with creating their own brands and creating their own devices, it's making them affordable to people and easy to plug and play, basically. The other part is about security. I don't think this is going to change much. So this is probably one point that you should have in consideration while buying new devices, is because it's hard, and more than that. First always comes functionality from my experience, and only after that the security will be a problem as well. So take this in consideration. The last part was probably my nightmare. I spent, I don't know how many nights, but a lot of them reading about devices, reading about protocols, trying to understand what kind of devices I needed, why, trying to get ideas, what could you do with those devices for things, what could you actually automate, and so on. And it's insane. It's completely, you have a huge amount of devices from do-it-yourself stuff that you can do a lot of things like doorbells, video systems, and stuff like that, from devices that you can plug and play, but probably only work on their own network or their own ecosystem and stuff like that. Okay, Related to this, what happened is that I was starting to research about this. I was looking to devices, and I was creating my own database with my reviews and my information so that later on I could actually order the devices that I needed. After this, the funny part was like, okay, the Excel didn't work out, then I had to create an actual backend to actually do that. Later on, my partner had a project that needed to do some training, and he actually picked up this as an example. So smart devices is going to be a tool that we're going to launch for the community, completely free. Okay? And the idea here is actually to have community content. Most of the reviews on devices are sparse around forums, around different websites, people who make reviews for a living and expect ads to get money out of it. So it's really hard to find and try to find the devices. So basically what we did was creating a tool, just allow to the community to put content in there and try to solve this problem. If it's going to be used, I don't know. Currently it's on a closed beta testing with a few friends and so on that are using it, and probably soon it will be launched as well. The idea here, once again, is to try to make all this information available in an easy way, allow people to have more information, also talking about if you have security concerns around certain devices, you can also put it in there, so try to concentrate this. As we have seen before, the market is going to be really huge. If this some point in time will make money, to be honest, I don't know. We'll see it. Okay. So, last but not least, I think probably a lot of things that I was looking into was looking into devices, and I didn't know much about electricity. Just I had a few concepts, I started looking into them, and later on started to look into solutions for my own problems. And with that, I started to see a few devices that I have here, and later on, if you guys can come here, I can also explain a little bit more extended ways about this. But for example, you have a device that comes from China, that is from a company that is called IoT. That is the Smarthome device. If you look into the web, this is basically was probably one of the devices that was cheapest to actually control lights. And it was quite hackable. You can also control, in this case, this is a device that contains two relays. You can use this, for example, to control your covers. Okay? In this case, this is a different one. It's something that you can put in an electric board that is DIN rails, and you can basically control 4 different circuits. Okay? I think this one, if I'm not wrong, the price tag is around 9 euros, something like that. Okay? I think it's a really nice thing, but it's not something that I would like to put in my house, to be honest. Okay? But it's still good for things like, for example, Christmas lights that are not always on and stuff like that. It's a really good device for do-it-yourself purposes. The next one is, this is a new, some new products that were built by a company that's called Alterco. They are based in Bulgaria, so they also have passed some of the standards for European Union. And there is another fact that you don't have to wait for 30 days to arrive at home because it's right here, right? It doesn't come from China either. This one, for example, it's also similar to the other one that I showed from Smarthome. It's a device that allows you to control 4 different channels and allows you to put that into the DIN rail as well. It contains an LCD that you can see some information, and inside it also allows you to do metering of power consumption as well. You can control this. One of the things that I like most about Shelly products, and all the products will have kind of the same firmware, is that they have what they call Shelly Cloud. You can connect this directly to the cloud and use their application to actually control this remotely, okay? And you are connecting to external cloud. I'm not a big fan of that. I want everything to be controlled from the inside and not going to the outside, but that's my personal preference and also related with the knowledge that I have about systems. But by default, the firmware allows you to actually connect to MQTT broker, and this is the way you can integrate, for example, with Home Assistant. You also have a REST API that can be used to automate all the configuration and so on, and you can also use the REST API to actually send the comments and that type of information. So not only that, some of these devices from Shelly also allows you to put some other firmwares, for example, Tasmata, that is an open source firmware that allows you to do almost everything like this, but in that way you actually know the code base. This one you don't, okay? But still it's a really good option. This one, if you want to compare, for example, the 4-channel from Sonoff, I think it's around 20 years. This one is around 60, okay? So, okay, there is a difference, there is, but there is also a difference in the how things are built, the quality of the product in the standards, okay? I'm not here to sell either Sonoffs or Shelly devices or Xiaomi any, okay? I'm talking about my personal experience and why I preferred some related to the other ones. So, going to the next other two devices, we have here two small ones, and I think this is probably where deal breaker things. We are thinking about, I have a home, I can change all my wiring and so on, so I can actually control this. Usually people go to what we call as smart lights or smart bulbs. But smart bulbs can do the trick, but there is a problem. If someone goes there and turns off the switch, the smart bulb doesn't work anymore, right? So that's one problem. And one of the first concepts from domotics is that everything should work as you as a human are expecting it to work. Your grandfathers fathers are at your home, you want the switch to still work, right? These small devices allows you to put, basically, after they were built, they use Wi-Fi, and they were built to be put, so after the switch and connected in there. After that, they will connect to a Wi-Fi router and use the same capabilities like or Shelly Cloud or to the MQTT broker as well. So to me, this is the smallest device that exists in the market with this kind of capabilities as well. In this case, this is a Shelly one, allows to control one single circuit and have the particularity that is it contains clean contacts. Clean contacts means that the device control circuit is completely separated to the output one. Okay? So that means in theory you should be able to put different voltage in there. I'm saying in theory because I never tried it, so to be honest. This one is similar to the other one and allows you to use two different relays. So in this case, this can either control two different circuits, lights for example, or can be used for controlling the roller shutters in the same manner. You can put them after the switch, you connect there, and so on. One small notice, most of the houses in Portugal don't have neutral wiring into the switches. So that might be the only thing that you might need to do, but should be easy, because you can just ask an electrician, or you can do it yourself, just to pass the wires from the junction box into the switch itself. But you need to have that. Another option, that is what I'm going to do, is to put these small devices on the junction boxes itself. But in that case, I'm preparing my house to actually have the connections and electricity built that way. And if one day, for some reason, I want to remove all of them, I just need to go there, remove the wiring, and I have a regular electricity circuit in there as well, okay? So I have a few other devices here. I'm just going to show so you can have a notion. So for example, this one is from, all of this that I have in my hand are from Xiaomi. This one allows you to control temperature and humidity. One of the good things about this, and one of the things that I'm going to use it, is to actually put it on bathrooms and actually detect when the humidity levels are high to turn on the extractors and ensure that they will only be turned off when the humidity is set to regular levels as well. There are some ways that people do this nowadays, try to automate this because people forget to put the exhausters on. That is connected to the light. When you turn on the light, it will connect the exhauster. That means a lot of times you don't need that as well. And not only that, if you are taking a bath during the day, the light isn't on, right? So it is not going to work. On the other hand, if you take the bath, you go outside from the bathroom, you probably will turn off the light. That means that the exhaustion will stop, but that's when it must be working on, okay? So this small stuff allows you to do these small tricks that improves your daily basis and also prevent, for example, in this case, moles everywhere in the house as well. So this small one is basically allows you to detect water leaks. So you can use this one to detect the water leaks and later on another device, for example, to cut the water supply and prevent that your house getting flooded. This one allows you to detect a motion. For example, if you are entering or someone else. This one is basically a door or window contact that allows you, when the door is open, the circuit will be open as well and allows you to notify. This can be used, for example, and it's what alarm systems companies use to actually detect when the circuit or a window was open and stuff like that. The good part with all of this is that you can actually use different manufacturers, different devices, integrate this in systems like Samsung SmartThings or even on something like Home Assistant as well, and create your own scenes. The last device that I'm talking about, I think this is really handy as well. It's a device that allows you to control a lot of appliances that are not or weren't made to be available on connected devices and as well. So this one allows you to control things like remote TVs that are not that smart, allows you to control air conditioning, everything that you have with infrared devices you basically can plug in here. You can record the infrared code, and later on you can use that and control that for with something like Home Assistant or even their own application, okay? So in theory, you have all of this. They are from different ecosystems. And for example, all of them are allowed to connect to Home Assistant in some manner, okay? But you can also use their own ecosystems and use it in there. Okay, any questions? I can also show, let me try to do, what time is it? It's late, I can show after that. Questions?
Good afternoon. I think it's not so difficult to show this. I think security is very important.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
I'm saying that I think security is very important in this subject. I would like to know your thoughts about ransomware. We've seen that last year's, there was some attacks, software, but we're talking about machines that are controlled by software, so it's important. So what do you think about should these devices be very carefully connected to the internet? Is there, because I don't know very well at the moment what are the thoughts about the community, or just these big companies start to sell these devices and then in the end we have big problems with this?
I think it's a good question. I personally think that will happen, definitely. The same thing that we have seen with the cameras, the security cameras that people started to buy and connect to the internet, this will probably buy with same devices. And I think there is concern about this, and I don't expect it to be addressed soon because we look into big companies and security issues are still not being addressed. I think there are some points in time that some people are doing some efforts to address this problem. For example, one of the things that in my personal opinion, I'm not going to connect anything to the internet. That's point, okay? That's the reason, like I mentioned, why I don't use Google Home connected to Home Assistant yet. I'm going to work on another solution where I can somehow use pull mechanism or a small subset of the APIs, something like that, okay? So yes, that's a problem, and And I think that's going to happen, to be honest. Yeah. More questions? Yeah. Sorry? In my case, I'm running Home Assistant on old Apple Mini device that I had there, somewhere in not being used. So I'm using on that one. Currently, my setup is not completely functional because I still didn't move, or the house isn't ready yet. So what I'm doing now is preparing everything. I'm automating everything with Ansible and basically to have all my deployment completely automated. And I use Docker to run everything. Okay. And in my case, it's Linux and using on home. On the Mac Mini. Yeah. And what I heard, you can easily put it on Raspberry. I did it as well. It was working fine. The only thing that you might have problems is probably related with the length of the card that you use on Raspberry Pi. But there are solutions for that as well. But depending on the amount of devices that you have connected there, it might be enough. In my case, I'm going to put CCTV cameras. I'm going to put some other software in there. So yeah, it wouldn't be an option anyway. Okay. More questions? Okay. Yeah.
You've talked about some son-offs that you can are hackable. You can install Tasmata on them, and basically you get the whole source code available to you. Do you know of any switches, wall switches from Tasmata as well? I think they have a solution where
you have Wi-Fi switches from Sonoff, you mean?
Yeah.
From Sonoff. They have Wi-Fi switches. You just need to be careful because some of them are squared. And for our case, in our houses, you need to have the circle ones. Otherwise, it wouldn't fit. But you can also use the Shelly devices if you want and put the Sonoff firmware on it. And that one allows you to put after the switch as well.
Okay.
If you want, we can talk a little bit after that.
Sure.
I'm not sure what is the time now. So yeah, it's time to go probably. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Some of my links are here. They will be available online anyway. The presentation is also online. And if you want to get some doubts or anything, just shout out Twitter or something like that, and I'm ready to help when I can, okay? Thank you for coming, and good to see you here. I hope you enjoyed it.